I'm Dennis Anderson along with Julie Zenner, and here's what's coming up on Almanac North.
For the first show of 2018, we'll have an overview of the 2017 shipping season with this sub-zero cold snap hampering the final days.
Also tonight, the Duluth Human Trafficking Task Force kicks off Trafficking Prevention Month with a special event next week.
And a panel of business experts returns for our annual Economic Year in Review.
You've come to the right place. Almanac North is next. Hello and welcome to Almanac North, and thank you very much for watching. And Julie, 2018 has started off with a bitter cold snap.
It has been brutal, but I hear that it's going to warm up at least into the 20s maybe this week.
That's what I'm hearing. It would be nice, and it's nice and toasty in the studio tonight, so it's all yours.
All right, thank you, Denny, and Happy New Year to everyone. Although the calendar has turned to 2018, there are still a few days remaining in the 2017 Great Lakes shipping season. By most accounts, it's been a good year for the region's shipping industry, with taconite shipments in particular on the rise. But the brutal cold temperatures of the last couple of weeks has slowed end of the season traffic to a crawl. Here with the latest on the shipping season is Adele Yorde, Public Relations Director for the Duluth Seaway Port Authority, and a very popular lady this week.
It's been a busy week. It's been a busy week.
So people have been watching as all of these vessels have kind of gathered outside the harbor,
it's
waiting.
Like that small armada of ships out there.
I counted 9 the other day.
There were 9 at one time. We're at 6 tonight, so there's some progress.
Give an explanation of what's happening with that and how this cold snap is really impacting shipping in and out of the port.
I think most people trying to start cars in the last week to 10 days understand that this cold snap that we've had is more like what we usually have in January. So it really hit early, and while ice hasn't been a problem up here, the cold weather's really raised havoc with a lot of the gears, if you will, of the whole part of the supply chain. So everything from clumps of iron ore pellets that need to be thawed in the rail cars so they can actually be moved, to the brakes, the pneumatic brakes on the railways coming down and delivering the ore, to the ice that's been building up on all of the cargo, the hatch covers on the decks of the ships. And then of course just the conveyor belts. If you imagine having to move, particularly at some of the loading facilities, miles of conveyor belts that have gotten stiff and crack and break. So all of those things, what normally in July you might have been able to load a 1,000-footer in 8 to 10 hours, it's taking double that and sometimes 2 days or more.
Wow. So Adele, what was the 2017 shipping season like? And are you expecting that to carry over into 2018?
Well, you know, the momentum, there was a real surge in iron ore in the 2017 season. Through November alone, it was running 3 million tons ahead of 2016. So there were a lot of projections that we would really get to that 35, 36 million ton again mark for our overall tonnage. But the slowdown has really affected that. I think we'll probably end up closer to that 32 million ton mark.
Still a good year.
Still a great year. Nice, strong year. The iron ore was really moving for domestic markets for steel making, but also internationally. The freight rates were great, and China was busy ordering iron ore.
Is there always kind of an end of the year rush and scramble as the season starts to end?
There is, and I think that's one of the reasons that there were 9 vessels. Normally you'll see maybe 2 or 3 waiting because there's one ore dock in Duluth, there's another in Superior, and then the other busy dock is up in Two Harbors. But the anchorage is right off the Duluth piers, even for the boats that are waiting to get into Two Harbors. And the end of the season, they're trying to get those last deliveries to build up the inventories at the steel mills on the lower
Sure.
lakes, because for 10 weeks after the locks close, they have to use what ore they have on site. So yeah, there's always that
Yeah.
end of the season rush.
The last salty to leave was the Beatrix. I think on December 17th it left the Twin Ports.
The Beatrix left on the 20th.
On the 20th.
And ironically, she's still in the Seaway.
My next question, has she made the Atlantic Ocean yet?
No.
No.
We were checking on her progress. There was a little episode that happened in the Snell Lock on Tuesday of this week, and they still haven't freed the Federal Biscay. It actually froze in the ice in the lock. It's a wider vessel. It's about 78 feet, and the width of that lock is 80. And with the fast-forming ice at that end of the Seaway, she's kind of frozen in place, and they've been trying to thaw. They've got 3 or 4 tugs working and divers to get her unstuck. And the Beatrix is waiting about 2 boats behind her. So
Is there a possibility that some of these vessels may wind up having to make last-minute adjustments on where they're going to be wintering? Because that's a big deal for communities to get these vessels staying in port.
it is. All of the fleet managers are on daily ice calls now with the Coast Guard, both the U.S. and Canadian Coast Guard, and they're redeploying assets, their ice-breaking assets as need be. But the fleets are having to maybe change some of their last end-of-season loading schedules. They may have to dump a cargo here or there and not be able to pick it up, because they do have to get to their winter ports of call and be able to clear the Soo locks by the 15th.
Ardell, is Lake Superior starting to freeze over?
It is, but you know, Lake Superior is so deep that it's only about 8 to 9% covered in ice right now. It's Lake Erie that's really struggling. They're almost 60% covered.
Really?
And the St. Clair and St. Clair River, Lake St. Clair and St. Clair River is where they're having most issues. They've got a lot of freezing, a lot of brash ice. It's even causing some flooding. So they've had to use the cutters to flush to get to move some of those. And then using them to cut tracks and some of the other ice up around the Soo locks and the St. Mary's River. So those are really kind of the catch points now.
What happens to cargo that doesn't make it out of port at the end of the season when there was an expectation that it was going to get out? Does it just sit there till spring? Do they load it on rail cars? What happens to it?
Most of what's on the docks now will stay, and usually by this time of year, all of those huge piles of pellets people have watched diminish, and that's pretty typical for this time of year. So what can't get delivered won't get delivered, and that it doesn't spoil. So those can sit there. They may have a few fines left over in the spring, but they'll start replenishing those inventories to start strong in the spring.
Is it dangerous for those crews who are still on vessels during this kind of a cold snap? Does it change how they work?
Oh, they certainly, this cold weather, if we think about how cold it is on shore, think about working on a slab of steel in the middle of an ice flat. The danger is more in the footing, as you can imagine, with the spray as they move, and that freezes on the top deck. So that gets a little bit challenging, but they always can move underground. They've got their tunnels to go aft and back and forth that way. So they just have to be very, very careful, particularly with the limited visibility. And a lot of them aren't moving at night now because of the moving ice plates.
Sure. Do we know, will some of the vessels anchored out in the lake spend their winter here in the Twin Ports?
The ones that are there now, no.
They won't.
Those haven't. We have about 6 coming in for winter layup.
Okay.
They're not here
But
yet.
these will move.
These will move. The 3 Canadian vessels are going to be up in Thunder Bay, but these have to get to their port. So one may peel off at a time if they don't think, if we're going to take a day or 2 to load and there's 6 there and we've got 10 days left, they may get called to home port before they get to actually make that last delivery.
Now we're going to ask you to change your hat a little bit, because the Port Authority is a sponsor of the Trafficking Awareness Month.
Yes,
I understand.
we are.
Talk about that. I think people might kind of take a step back and say, is human trafficking really happening and really a problem in our community?
You know, I got involved on the Duluth Trafficking Task Force. The Port Authority did about 4.5–5 years ago. And it's an amazing story. What we all think of as prostitution, if we go back 20 years and what our imagery is of women working a street corner and being solicited for sex. What's happened with the internet is so much of it has gone, if you will, underground. And so much of that kind of activity happens on places like Backpage.com. And so being able to count and quantify is a really hard thing to know, except we know what some of the risk factors are. And particularly at the age of entry between 12 and 14, A lot of it comes from homelessness. Any day, there's probably 400 teens that are couch hopping or house sharing who don't have a permanent residence. And so that puts those youth at risk. And once you have that vulnerability, they can be preyed upon.
Adele, is human trafficking a problem on the waterfront?
You know, not as much as it was, again, 15 years ago. All of the regulations that went in with the Homeland Security after 9/11 changed port security rules. So everything has security fencing, security guards in place when there are ships at the dock. And we've had all of those security officials trained through the Duluth Police Department of things to watch for, things to look for. So there have not been any cases reported and investigated since 2002. So we're hoping that locally we've put a lid on it. But we always say the port is but one part of a pretty large community. And we stay involved because it really is. It takes all of us to know what the risk factors are, to know what we can do as parents, as grandparents, as teachers, business owners, to be able to help thwart it, to help end it, but also to help prevent it. And I think the efforts this year, the kickoff event on Monday at
Talk
noon.
about that kickoff event, because we're running out of time.
Yep, Monday at noon, people will get to hear of a lot of the programs that are in place to help prevent youth from actually being exposed to that. So help them learn about healthy relationships, avoid those kinds of situations where they can be taken advantage of.
And where and when?
Noon, Monday, January 8th at the Dr. Robert Paulus Cultural Center, 2nd and 2nd. So we'll see
And
folks
everyone's
there.
invited. Yep.
Everyone's invited, public event, lots of great
This
information.
is a big deal.
It is a big deal.
All right,
Thank
Adele
you,
Yorde,
Adele.
thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's been an annual tradition now for more than 20 years to bring economic experts on the program at the beginning of a new year. We have them look back at the business highs and lows of the previous year and then make some predictions for the economy over the next 365 days. So let's welcome back Tony Barrett, the senior member of our esteemed panel. He's a professor of economics at the College of St. Scholastica. Ron Brochu is editor and co-publisher of BusinessNorth, and Sakib Mahmud is an assistant professor of economics at UW Superior. Thank you all for being here tonight. Tony, let's start with you.
Okay.
I want to ask right off the bat, is President Trump doing anything to help the economy?
Oh, yes.
What's he doing?
Without a doubt. We have not had such a pro-business president and administration in 50 years, maybe? And that's definitely having an impact on business decisions, investment decisions, hiring decisions. So yeah, you got to give them some of the credit.
Mm-hmm. So, Kate, as you look at the regional economy, what do you see as maybe the big economic story for 2017?
I would say we had a moderate growth in our reef region, and but looking forward, actually, here we have an aging population, and that's the worrying part in the reef region. And what we have to do is basically, if we can diversify our economy rather than depending on the mining and too much dependency, I would say, in the commodity market, and to attract more young couples to settle down in this area would be nice. So I'm basically talking about immigration.
Ron, the Dow closed the other day over the 25,000 mark. What's fueling the economy?
Well, there's two ways to look at that. That's a good point, and obviously business is doing well. On the other hand, the interest rate is still low, and people who want a good return on investment generally turn to equities. So that's powering it, and retirements, buying equities, retirement funds, and it's pushing that up.
Let's talk about some of the regional industries. Mining, starting with that. Big news today with Polymet, with the DNR draft permit to mine being put out. What do you think? Is this going to happen?
I think it was initially proposed 14 years ago. So don't hold your breath. I mean, these things have gone glacially slow, and we haven't even gotten the lawyers involved. So Polymet may happen, but it's not going to happen anytime to have an economic impact, that we can foresee 10 years. The big news is the SR Steel project is alive. I mean, Chippewa has come to the rescue, and that's moving forward. And that's going to be an incredible boost to the regional economy during the construction and then the jobs afterwards.
What are the hot jobs right now?
Well, if you mean by hot, where can you get a good wage? That's a good question.
Right, that's a good hot job.
Obviously, any job up in the mines, those have always been very good jobs, especially in rural America. We have a good architecture and engineering sector. They have a hard time finding people. For just the general, job, average job, Duluth is not a high wage economy. And I hear constantly, we can't find workers, we can't find workers, we can't find workers. And I say, well, have you thought about paying them more? And I can't afford that, I can't afford that. Well, that's the dilemma. If you can't find a worker, pay more.
So if I wanted a hot job and I was a college student, what are the hot courses? What should I take in college?
Oh, that's a
loaded
tough question.
Yeah.
What do you want, instant payoff? You want instant payoff? Nursing, jobs like that, healthcare. Those jobs pay well. The long career, you can be a nurse for 30, 40 years. Your pay doesn't go up. Believe it or not, the greatest rate of return over 30 years is the liberal arts degrees. But that's hard to sell to an 18-year-old who worries, what can I do with an English major or a history major? Well, what you can do is get in a job and then get promoted.
Ron, Sakib mentioned the aging population, and of course that's creating some job opportunities in our core industries, like in the mining industry. Do you see that the industry is well positioned to fill those jobs as they open up, and that they're working closely enough with higher education to have that right connection?
They are preparing, and they're preparing all the time. The problem is there could be a worker shortage, in terms of, say, blue-collar professions like welding, and a lot of the folks who were raised on the Iron Range will go into those jobs, but a lot of them also will look at it and say, boy, it's just an up and down thing, and I'd rather have more career stability in my life. So getting folks involved in those types of professions that they use in the mines hasn't been easy, but they're working hard at it.
Sakib, consumer confidence appears pretty high right now. Why is that?
I think people are feeling good about the economy at the moment. Like, the tax, if you look at the budget regarding the tax decisions and all, and people are thinking, okay, we'll have some money to spend this year. And I think and probably looking at the overall economy as, we have heard from the other panelists, like talking about there's a bit of like in the future, we are thinking, the business confidence is also high, and probably this is actually, there's a bit of like a spillover effect, you can say. The consumers also feeling good about it. The housing prices is also going up, and people with the fixed rate, like most cases, people have the fixed mortgage rate. So even with the interest rate going up, it is a good deal for most of the households, I would say.
Ron, what are you hearing and seeing in the manufacturing sector?
Well, it's busy right now, especially in the mines, but in other industries also. But some are, like say paper making, that's been in a long, slow decline, and we saw more evidence of that with the Blandon plant, and Some of the, I think it's strong, you know, in northwest Wisconsin, there's a lot of smaller manufacturing plants, but it's moving along right now, and it's probably going to continue.
Ron, are you noticing our housing starts strong right now, or have we plateaued?
Multifamily housing, you know, apartment buildings, at least in the Duluth Superior area, are strong, but single family has never really rebounded since the recession.
Tony, you were sitting here listening to the conversation on the port. Any thoughts about our transportation industry and activities, what you're seeing with intermodal and
Exactly. When I moved here to Duluth, everyone was talking about we need to diversify our economy. That's 28 years ago.
Sure.
The port's doing that too now. With their container ships, they're looking for new products. I mean, we can rely for years to come on taconite shipments. I mean, that's still going to be there. But if we want to grow the port, we've got to get other cargoes coming in and leaving. And over the last few years, you've really seen some signs of life on that. And that's adding growth. I mean, that's where the growth comes from. I mean, maintaining the status quo is fine. You have to do that. But if you're going to grow, you need something new. And the port's working on that. A lot of our local manufacturing businesses, I mean, they're small businesses, 100 employees maybe, but they're growing. And that's where you're going to get the organic growth that's going to continue over the years.
Some of your students must be asking you, what do lawmakers need to do to spur economic growth?
Well, we certainly have seen with this new administration and the various secretary cabinet of people, movements toward deregulation and getting the government out of the way of business. There's a real balance there. You have regulations because you're trying to promote some social good. On the other hand, you need economic growth to create jobs and income. We're now swinging, and the pendulum has swung in the other direction now towards more deregulation and less government involvement. You know, you put in something like, the sick and safe day, and you require that. Well, that's not going to help business. Now, it may help people and it may help society, but it's not going to help the economy. And we need to be aware of that trade-off.
We've got to move into the favorite part of the show where we look at your predictions from last year.
Yeah.
And I hate to give you the lion's share with another question right away, but you are the first up with your prediction from last year.
And I've been warned.
All right, so let's take a listen.
I think we're going to see more tariffs imposed. I think a very good case can be made to justify tariffs against Chinese steel.
Okay.
And that would be obviously good for our region. I think you're going to see faster economic growth, but 2.5%, 3%. Where you'll be able to probably nail me to the wall a year from now. I think a year from now we'll be talking about at least 3% inflation.
Okay.
Well,
disappointed about the tariffs. As a free trade person, I'm glad we didn't get them, but
Yeah.
I still think there's a good chance we'll see them next year. Inflation is accelerated, just not as fast as I thought, and we're right around 2.5%, 3% growth.
Ron, let's hear what you said last year.
And I think it'll be a good year economically, but I think there's going to be a lot of strife between pro-industry groups and anti-industry groups, and the sick time issue, the paid leave, that type of issue.
Did you hit it on the head?
That's pretty good.
Pretty close.
To some extent.
Yeah, pretty close.
Yeah. And there hasn't been a vote on that yet.
Right.
But it looked, we can kind of guess that at least some of that'll be approved.
all right, Sakib, let's hear what you had to say last year.
The GDP will grow because of those tax cuts if they're introduced, and if there's a spending on the infrastructure. 2017 would be a good year, but 2018 I agree with Ron here and John, like Tony here, like that there might be inflation impact, and central bank might have to step in. Yeah, I think most of the predictions were right? Okay. And regarding inflation, it is a bit, not bad, surprising, I would say. Like, still we're below the 2%, and that's a quandary. If you look at the bond, long-term bond yield, it is like flattened out. It's, like right now it is dropped a bit. So looks like the future inflation expectations among the investors is actually low.
All right, well, we need to get your prediction for the upcoming year, so let's start with you.
As I would say, like this year we'll also see a bit of like consumption expenditure going up, investment will also go up. So overall, I'm expecting to see GDP growth. Inflation, I think it might be close to 2%, but I don't know whether it might go up depending on the, how much people are spending, that.
All right, Ron?
I think there will be investment in construction, but primarily from the private or the public and the nonprofit sectors, probably healthcare, whatever comes out of the Minnesota legislature in terms of bonding. We've got some of those projects in the work now. Retail, I think, is going to be the questionable one just because of the switch from buying from a brick and mortar store to the internet.
All right, Tony, go out on a limb.
The economy is going to grow faster than 3% next year. Fed's going to raise interest rates 4 times. And we're all going to be complaining about the lack of wage growth.
All right.
Okay, we got to run on that. Tony, Ron, Sakib, thank you so much. We'll see you all next year. All right.
Have a good
you.
year.
All right. Let's turn now to the business news from our friends at Business North. The Chisholm-Hibbing Airport Authority reported that a record number of airline passengers departed from Range Regional Airport in 2017. Combined airline service provided by Sun Country, Delta, and its SkyWest Airlines affiliate served more than 15,000 passengers, a 20% increase from last year. Airport officials said a new terminal built in 2015 contributed to the milestone. The $12 million project added more space and better amenities for travelers.
3 area companies were recognized in December by the Northwest Wisconsin Workforce Investment Board. BW Paper Systems of Phillips received the Business of the Year award for large companies. The firm has global experience in corrugating, packaging, and bookbinding. Cutting Edge Metals of Superior received the Business of the Year award for small business. It makes custom handmade goods without assembly lines or robots. The Senior Resource Center in Hayward got the Community Impact Award. The organization serves, supports, and advocates for older adults. All 3 were honored for their outstanding commitment to their community and employees.
One established firm and another that's new are moving into Duluth's ever-changing restaurant market. Sound, a new restaurant and music venue, will open Tuesday at the former home of Tycoons and the Blind Pig on East Superior Street. The restaurant is the creation of Chef Patrick Scott and is his first solo endeavor. The Vanilla Bean, which has operated in 2 harbors for 20 years, will be opening February 1st in Mount Royal Shopping Center. The site formerly housed Bixby's and most recently Northern Waters Restaurant, which operated there for 7 months. For more on these and other stories, visit BusinessNorth.com.
If you have a comment on our show, call now. Dial 218-788-2849 to leave a message. You can also send an email to Almanac North at WDSE.org and visit the WDSE website for updates on our broadcast schedule, the latest on your favorite local shows and special events here at the station. And Julie, one of those special events is happening this Sunday, January 7th from 3 to 7 p.m. It's a launch party for WDSE's new show called Making It. It's at Blacklist Artisan Ales in downtown Duluth. There'll be music, food, and great Java across the street at Duluth Coffee.
All right, excited for the premiere of that.
Me too.
Sunday.
For Julie and the crew at WDSE, I'm Dennis Henderson. Have a great weekend. Good night, everybody, and be kind.